Awesome, thank you. Yes, so I think on this topic of productivity, I think one is just to zoom out to the bigger picture of, this kind of came up last night when talking about productivity. There's maybe a system level to think about it while we're talking about the rumen and the potential for rumen manipulation to lead to improvements in productivity. We also need to think about productivity in general, right? And all the different things that we can do within that really complex, messy system that can reduce emissions per unit of product, right? And we've seen that overall in the long term. And I think that's important to keep in mind from a standpoint of just furthering progress, avoiding emissions from that standpoint. So we don't really think about reproductive efficiency or just in general feed efficiency and those type of things from that standpoint, but I think we have to always keep our mind on that bigger system as well. And then it was mentioned earlier from Dr. Tedeschi, right? If we think about where all this methane stuff started, of course, it's more from a energetics standpoint, right? And thinking about that total energy potential we throw into these ruminant critters, that gross energy. If we truly oxidized all the feed to just CO2 and water, what is the energy potential there? And there's that off-cited stat of 2 to 12% of the gross energy, right? Johnson & Johnson, 1995, that could be potentially used as energy in the animal. And I think that's where a lot of this excitement comes from that standpoint. And it is true, potentially, if we shuffle the hydrogen, right? But I think the point that was just made by Jed is really important, and just to kind of almost on the beef side of things, think about this of what would that actually translate into. Just some napkin math there. If we think about, say, more from a finishing cattle perspective, if we were to achieve a 50 gram per day reduction in methane, which would be pretty significant in terms of effect size, I think the best we could hope for in terms of like what that translates into as average daily gain would be about 0.05 kilograms per day of gain, right? So to actually pick that up from an experimental standpoint, we'd need to have, let's see here, I wrote it, 500 animals per treatment, okay? So that's one of those things to keep in mind, and if we get even smaller than that, down to a 20 gram per day difference, which is sometimes that, 10 to 15% reduction, we might be thinking about, now we need 3,000 animals per treatment in a highly controlled environment, not a chaotic environment like a farm, just to pick up that average daily gain response, right? So it's not that it's nothing, but I think that sometimes when we do these experiments for methane reduction, we're doing smaller studies or Latin squares, this was mentioned, and that's good to determine the efficacy of methane. But if we want to answer those questions that would potentially be more important for adoption, we need a different strategy, and we need to think about larger scale experiments to try to pick up these pretty small effect sizes. They can be important, they can be enticing, right? But to actually see them, we need a lot more experimental units to replicate that. Thanks.